Paris regularly tops the list of the most beautiful cities in the world and is one of the world's most popular tourist destinations. But what makes it so special? What is it about this legendary city that makes it so attractive to people worldwide? If we look at the reasons why Paris brings in 50 to 70 million tourists a year, what would we discover? Is it just because of its famous landmarks like the Eiffel Tower? Is it because it's a 15-minute city? Or is Paris actually not as great as its reputation suggests, riding the coattails of old fame? Let's discuss on this week's episode of The Perfect City. I'm Tayana Panova, Doctor of Psychology focusing on urban planning's impact on health, and my co-host Ariel Viera is a documentarian that examines the intersection between history and urbanism. Let's dive in. Ariel, what do you think about the 15-minute city?
God.
A controversial topic.
One of the most controversial topics for some very odd reason in North America. And parts of Europe. What I really enjoyed about visiting Paris was that I didn't need to think about where I'm going to buy groceries, where I'm going to have my morning coffee or pastry, where I'm going to have for lunch, where I'm going to buy a lunch or a dinner to go, and things, even things that seem rather superfluous, like where am I going to buy a nice little postcard or a greeting card, or where am I going to go to the cinema? Things like that I just didn't need to think about. I would just walk and I'll eventually get there. Also in terms of transit. So I think that aspect of the 15-minute city is what I really love.
Well, a 15-minute city, which has been in the news recently, it really had a very heated discussion around it lately. And actually, it's because of Paris. The person who coined the term is Carlos Moreno. He's a professor at the Sorbonne, the university in Paris. And Anne Hidalgo, who's the mayor of Paris, made it her platform because a 15-minute city is a city where you can reach everything that you need or want to reach on a daily basis within 15 minutes of walking or taking non-polluting transit, for example, cycling. And so this concept is about convenience, really, at the end of the day. It's about making your daily life convenient by putting the things that you would regularly visit, like a grocery store, like a cafe, like a bakery, a short walk or bike ride away from your home. It's about a comfortable, convenient city where everything is at a walkable distance. And there was this graphic that went viral on Twitter and on other platforms of a map of Paris and all like the bakeries marked. And it was saying how every Parisian that lives in Paris is a 5-minute walk away from a bakery because that's how many of them there are, and they make it so that every person who wants a fresh bread in the morning can get one like this in minutes. And people really like this idea. It took off. A lot of people jumped on it and loved it and said, yes, I would love that level of convenience. Bring it on. But on the other hand, there was a lot of people who, because it was such an unfamiliar concept, such a new idea, they found it to be concerning and they didn't like this idea of a 15-minute city. What does that mean? To them, it sounded like a new kind of futuristic concept where they assumed, well, if it's 15-minute cities, that means that 15 minutes is the cutoff. And then I can't go further. I'm trapped within a 15-minute radius. And that caused a lot of fear and anxiety because people were so unfamiliar with this idea of walkability, since so many of our cities these days are car-centric and people are so used to getting to everything by driving, that just this concept of having everything you might need within a 15-minute walk radius was very foreign and, in a sense, scary because they couldn't understand. I think a lot of people couldn't understand that there's no catch. You know, there was a lot of, wait, what's the catch with this? Oh, you're going to make my life easier and more convenient and more pleasant just like that? No catch? I don't believe it, you know?
You're going to trap me in the city.
You're going to trap me in the city. A lot of people thought this was the hidden agenda, was to trap people in the city where you couldn't leave past 15 minutes. And that's not the case. That's not the case at all. It's literally just about convenience. And the catch is, if you want to say, quote unquote, the catch, it's that it works for everyone and it's good for everyone. It's good for businesses because when you have a 15 city, you have more people walking, you have a ton of foot traffic, more people entering stores. It's good for the environment because there's less pollution, because you don't have to drive everywhere, you can just walk. So there's no catch. The thing about it is that everyone benefits, which can be hard to believe, but it's true. And Paris is showing that because Paris is becoming more and more of a 15-minute city every day because of these intentional efforts by the mayor Anne Hidalgo and because the city has embraced this concept.
Yeah, because Paris is one of the amongst the larger cities of Europe. Has a massive population, and sometimes we think of it just the quaint streets in the center of Paris, right by the Louvre, but we don't realize that the metropolitan area, well, is beyond all of that beautiful Haussmannian architecture. Why are they uncomfortable with the ideas of Paris being in their home city?
I think people are afraid of having something taken from them. You know, when you have, for example, a car and you drive it everywhere, then you associate that with a comfortable way of life. You don't realize that you drive everywhere because you have to drive everywhere, because your city or your suburb is designed in such a way that you simply can't walk to your destinations even if you want to. And so, of course, you need your car, you're dependent on it, but that's because you've been robbed of the option of being able to walk and bike to your destinations, because those options are inherent in a walkable city, which most cities and suburbs are not. They are not walkable, they are car-centric. When people hear 15-minute city, they think, I'm going to have to walk. I'm going to have to bike. What if I don't want to? What if I like driving? But that's the thing. No, you don't have to do those things. You can also drive. Paris is full of cars and traffic. Barcelona is a 15-minute city and it's full of cars and traffic. You have cars. You can drive. You're just not forced to because you have other options. You can also walk to your destinations. You can bike to your destinations. You can take transit. You can scooter. You can rollerblade. In actuality, a 15-minute city gives you more. It doesn't take anything from you. And I think this is a big misconception. People are afraid that it's going to mean having to give up something they like their car. And that's not true.
Yes, a car can unlock spontaneity when it comes to reaching longer distances, that being nature, national parks, going from small town to small town. But in a big city, a car really kind of limits spontaneity because you're going from point A to point B. So the only important thing is point B. You're not really stopping in the way because it's an inconvenience. You have to find parking. You have to spend more money on gas and mileage. You have to navigate sometimes through smaller streets. So it's not really that convenient to be spontaneously exploring the city. And that's what I love about Paris. Tens of millions of people visit the city. Some stats say it's 50 million people. Sometimes they say it's up to 80 million people. It's a massive amount of people coming. It's one of the most popular cities in the world. Why do, for example, Americans that live in car-dominated culture come to Paris and love it, but then they go back home and they don't want their homes to be like Paris?
They like it when they sample it, but it's just so different and it's so foreign that they can't imagine it being their backyard. Because they think, oh, no, I mean, it's a different culture and we can't really adopt that because X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, you know, we have the human culture, which is all humans like things that are convenient. We like safety, we like comfort, we like beauty, we like fun experiences. So we share these things. It transcends culture and nationality. And if we like those things when we visit them on vacation, then we will like those things when we have them in our backyards back home. And I think that when you travel to places like Paris, you start to get a feel for that. You start to ask yourself, wait a second, why don't I have this where I live? I mean, it's pretty great. And so traveling to places like Paris, like you said, 50 to 70 to 80 million people per year travel and see Paris. And I like to believe that they bring some of those impressions home and they start making those changes where they live. More cycling, more more green space, more walkability, and all these things that Paris does so well. I mean, they have this initiative now, which I love. It's where they're taking
Right.
schoolyards, and they're making them like public squares on the weekends when the kids aren't around. So they're taking spaces and they're finding ways to open them up to more people, create community hubs. They're closing streets to traffic and making them open to other kinds of mobility. So they're really showing how flexible and adaptive environments are when your intention is to make them people friendly, because you have to start with a goal, you have to start with a vision. And if your goal is to make a city more people friendly, more enjoyable, then you can start making changes in line with that goal. And that's what we're seeing in Paris today, even though it was quite different in the past.
Okay, let's break down why is Paris people friendly? Because I think there's a few key major factors as to why. I think one of the major factors is Paris doesn't have a central park, and that's so sometimes what people say when I'm bright-eyed talking about Paris. Oh, I love Paris. It feels so nice, and people are like, oh yeah, but it doesn't have a big park. But Paris is one of those cities where you find small parks everywhere. In nearly every arrondissement, which are the neighborhoods, you'll find a park to go to around the corner. Some of them are hidden. Some of them are right in the middle of the boulevards. Some of them are in between blocks, but there's a lot of parks. And I think a second factor is multi-use. In America, we usually split zoning between residential, commercial, and industrial. And even commercial split usually into two different distinct zones, stores and retail, and then we have offices. But in Paris, large portions of the city is actually multi-use. So you have commercial on the first level, and then you have residential in the upper floors.
Very important. Like you said, the little parks and gardens that are scattered throughout the city are so valuable. And that ties into the 15-minute city again, because like we said, all of the things that you could want or need to visit on a daily basis are a short walk away, and that includes parks. That's why you have all these little green spaces scattered so that they're a short walk from everybody. And this, I think what's very interesting about this is that it was intentionally designed that way. So when Paris went through its big redesign in the 1800s, before that, they only had 4 public parks. And then the Grand Urban Planner,
George Eugene Haussmann, yeah.
yes, he was instructed to make more parks. So Napoleon III said, we need more parks. And so they planted 600,000 trees, and 2,000 hectares of parks and green space were added after that order was given. So it didn't just happen, you know, it was very intentional. We need more green space. People need places where they can breathe fresh air. Kids need places where they can run free. And this should be a walkable distance from everyone. Not only that, but squares. So another order given by Napoleon III to Haussmann was, we need squares. We need squares that are close to every Parisian. And what I find really interesting is that he specifically said there need to be places for relaxation and recreation for all the families and the children. So from all socioeconomic classes. And that's what they did. They added a lot of new squares. I think it was 24 new squares were added, as well as all of the new parks. And it was intentional that they be scattered throughout the city so everybody had access to them. They were a close walk to everyone. And that's what makes it people friendly. It's this understanding that every person shares this human culture, like I talked about earlier. Every person, no matter what their background or their socioeconomic status, likes to breathe fresh air and go to the park. They like a public square where they can bump into neighbors and have a coffee. They like to be able to walk to the grocery store or the boulangerie. So designing for humans creates a human-friendly city, and Paris really demonstrates that.
The Paris we know today came at a cost. Because Paris was massively redesigned from 1853 to 1870. Yeah. George Eugene Haussmann, as you mentioned, main urban planner, had to destroy massive swaths of the city. Yeah. There's only a few exceptions, like Le Marais district today. That ended up displacing hundreds of thousands of people. Some figures say it's 350,000 people. Yeah. was the destruction of Paris worth the cost of a city that tens of millions of people tend to love today?
That's a big question, because if you ask those people at that time, they might not have said, yes, this is worth it, because the vision wasn't completed yet. Now, when we see the final product and how amazing it is, we can, retroactively say that was worth it. That was a worthwhile effort. But it's difficult in the times to accept change, because change means losing something in order to gain something. And it's important to be able to communicate the vision and the end goal clearly to people in order to make them understand why certain sacrifices may be worth it in a few years. Like, for example, when you're making a street pedestrian, you're going to have some construction noise, and you're going to have to close that street to traffic, which is going to inconvenience some people. But if you can communicate to them that the end result will be an incredible space that they will be free to enjoy, and it will be so much better than what they have now, and to try to make that transition as easy for them as possible, then, I think it can be done. I think people do often see the vision. And actually, in that redesign that you're talking about in the mid-1800s, a lot of the people had positive reactions to it. A lot of the people were happy with the changes being made because they were suffering. They were suffering in those neighborhoods. They were super cramped. They weren't sanitary. There was pollution. It was not comfortable. They didn't have fresh air. There was no sunlight that reached the ground. And so people were not having a good time. They didn't enjoy the state of things. So when somebody came in with a very clear vision for how to make it better, and capable people who knew how to do that, and then they started seeing the progress, people embraced it. They thought, okay, I see that this is going in a direction of progress, and I like it. I think that this will end up being something good. And it did end up being something good. So I think that that's important, to kind of the clear communication of the vision and showing people success stories, so that you can give them hope and make them less afraid of change.
I think that's another beauty of Paris is its incredible use of density.
Yeah.
And I think the main factor is how George Eugene Haussmann ended up setting a uniform style of about 7 stories tall across massive portions of the city, which doesn't make the density feel overwhelming like skyscrapers in downtown Manhattan or the condos of Toronto. But instead, it makes you feel like you're walking through a human scale city, because the ratio of the actual street compared to the height of the buildings is actually that perfect ratio where you feel like, oh, this is my city. This is something that is built for me, not built for the car or a highway.
It's human size, because enormous towers, they're not human size. Enormously wide streets, they're designed for cars. So it just feels like you're out of place there as a pedestrian. Whereas when you have moderately height buildings, narrow streets, you still feel the sunshine and the fresh air. It feels like that place is made for you. It feels like it's your size. And I think that's super important for creating a sense of comfort and feeling welcomed in a city, is when it's designed for your comfort and your enjoyment. And something that you touched upon as well that I think is super important about Paris is the fact that it doesn't actually feel crowded. It's a very dense city, and it gets so many tourists per year that I think it's normal to assume it's a crowded city that feels like it's full of people and it's overwhelmed by tourists, and it's just unpleasant to be in because there's so much going on, so many people on the streets. But actually, every time I've visited Paris, I find it to be incredibly peaceful and tranquil, and I do not run into crowds outside of the main tourist destinations like Eiffel Tower or the Louvre. Sure, you have crowds always around the 2 or 3 or 4 main landmarks, but in the neighborhoods, in the boulevards that surround the landmarks, you often have very few people because the density is so well distributed evenly around the city, because of this uniform mid-sized building that you find everywhere, and it just distributes all the people better.
Yeah, because I think us Americans have kind of this mental block that density should be
Felt
in
like
one
crowded.
location. Yeah, in the downtown, or in New York City's context, the midtown. It should only be in those places, in the smaller town context, just on the main street.
Yeah.
But no, density, when it's spread out and distributed evenly allows for the city to not feel crowded. As you mentioned, it does feel more at ease and at peace in many parts of the city. We should also be applying those learnings to smaller cities and to even towns. Why shouldn't a town have 7 stories around its main street for 15 minutes, 20 minutes walking distance? And then the rest could be very suburban, because then we alleviate the pressure that we put on these larger popular cities like Paris, at least in that region of Europe, where everyone gravitates to because it is the better of the design cities of France. It is the better design city in Europe in general. So we have to learn from Paris in order to bring Paris more to everywhere else.
And I think that's something that really stands out in Paris in terms of, what makes it so attractive, why is it so well designed. One of the secret ingredients to what makes it so special is its landmarks and the way they're distributed throughout the city. I think this is something that I haven't heard many people talk about, but I think is so well done in Paris. And that's, first of all, that they have these amazing landmarks, but the way that they punctuate the space is very intentionally done. So you have the Arc de Triomphe, and you have the Eiffel Tower, and then you have these incredible buildings and the Louvre, and they are not only visible from multiple vantage points throughout the city, which means that they add character to the landscape from many different points throughout the city. They help you navigate the city better because when you see them, you know exactly where you are. But they're also incredibly well connected to each other through these well-designed boulevards with plentiful sidewalk space and street trees. And so you have the Arc de Triomphe is connected to the Louvre, and there's a park in the middle, and then the Eiffel Tower. So there's this incredible web of streets, main streets, that connects the nodes of landmarks in Paris. And the way this is done is so masterful because you find yourself walking along an amazing boulevard like Champs-Élysées, for example, that's full of shops and fun experiences and street performers and street trees. And then lo and behold, you end up at the Arc de Triomphe on one end. And then if you go in the other direction, you end up walking through the park, the Tuileries Park, and then you end up at the Louvre. And just this experience of walking along a beautiful and interesting street and ending up at an awe-inspiring landmark and then doing it over and over again in different directions means that every walk you take in Paris is an adventure, and it's a beautiful experience because you have this design that makes both the journey and the destination a joy. If it's well done, and those landmarks are well connected by interesting streets and lovely parks, like we talked about earlier, that are scattered all about, you have this amazing blend of things that people enjoy, and they're put together in such a way that enhances their appeal. And so the overall experience of the city becomes much better. It becomes the magical city that we think of when we think of Paris. I think that is a huge part of it that should also be embraced by other places. The way the landmarks are, the way the streets are that connect them, these grand boulevards, and between those boulevards, those really cozy, comfortable, people-friendly, narrower streets and alleys that we talked about that feel so calm and peaceful because the people are evenly distributed among them and they don't crowd in any one place. So that's really something that's very special, I find, in Paris. And in a sense, it imitates nature, which is something that we're going to talk about in a future episode, I'm sure. Biophilia, which is the love of nature, and how when we replicate nature in design, people are really drawn to that. But if you look at a leaf, for example, under a light, you see how its main veins, the bigger veins, between them, there's all the smaller capillaries. And that creates a beautiful design in the leaf. But also, it's a great way to design a city. And you can really see that in cities like Paris and Barcelona. When you look at them from above, they have the bigger veins of the leaf, which are the boulevards. And then between them, you have the smaller capillaries that twist and wind. And those are the narrower streets. And that creates a very interesting, dynamic city design. So it's really a key to great urban planning that Paris has mastered, I think.
Paris is designed almost like a wheel, and the spokes of the wheel are the grand boulevards, and they emanate. But the thing is, since they emanate in that circular fashion, they create these smaller pockets that are start small and then get bigger and bigger and bigger, but that they're cut through smaller streets. To think that we can build a city, even from a small scale to a large scale city, from Albany to Shanghai, you'll need landmarks, because landmarks are what helps us humans relate to a city and know where we are. Because it is reflective upon nature. In nature, you know where the river is, you know where the mountain is, you know where
The North Star.
no star. So we have like visual key indicators in nature. And if we're designing a city where, especially like Paris, where it's uniform in its style throughout large portions of the city, you need landmarks to help people feel like they know where they're going, where they are.
They punctuate the space, and that's another thing that's wrong with suburbs, for example, is that suburbs have no real landmarks. It's all just the same kind of houses and the same kind of streets and the trees that are at the same distance from each other. It all becomes so homogeneous and nothing stands out because there are no landmarks, that it becomes very disorienting and confusing trying to navigate it. And I often find myself getting lost when I'm walking around a suburban subdivision because everything looks the same. And on a psychological level, this causes us stress because we can't orient ourselves, and if there's danger, for example, we can't easily escape because we don't know where we are. So on a subconscious level, this gives us a sense of distress. We need those landmarks to help us navigate more easily and know where we are.
Okay, so the final point we'll talk about is the actual act of walking. So when it comes to walkability, in Paris, you can walk many hours without realizing you're walking. But one block people have to build better cities in many parts of North America is, walking is boring. Walking for more than 30 minutes is tedious. But the reason for that is that we're walking through places with no soul, no landmarks, no differentiation. Walking through a suburb for 30 minutes feels very long, but walking through Paris for 30 minutes feels like you're going around the corner.
I think it's because there's such a high density of things to see and do in a walkable city, whereas there's a very low density of things to see and do in the suburb. So like you said, 30 minutes walking through a suburb, and I have a TikTok on this as well. 30 minutes walking through a suburb, you see a few big box stores, a few enormous parking lots, a few houses that all look the same, and then that's it. Whereas in a city that's designed for people, designed to be walkable, everything is close by. And so you're constantly seeing different shops, different cafes, you're seeing parks, you're seeing landmarks, you're seeing public squares, you're seeing buildings, and there's just more things to see, a higher number of things to see within a shorter space. So everything is more dynamic, and you're experiencing new things constantly. Your senses are activated. You're smelling the fresh bread. You're seeing a very interesting window display. You're bumping into a neighbor and having a short conversation. So you're having a lot of experiences within that same period of time. Whereas in a place that's not designed for you as a human, it's designed for a car to speed through in seconds, there's nothing there for you to engage your senses or capture your attention. So it's dull. It doesn't capture your attention. It's boring.
Exactly. Precisely. So what's one place in Paris that you recommend people going to?
For me, it has to be probably along the Seine. Along the Seine, and that's an interesting topic as well from an urbanist perspective, because the street right along the Seine used to be a car supporting street. It used to have traffic moving through it. It used to be very congested. And the mayor, Anne Hidalgo, made it pedestrian. She took out the cars and she activated it. And now in the summer especially, there's like the Paris Plage, which is this set of activations where there's activities for kids and games and performances and dance classes and just all these things happening right along the water that makes this what used to be just a normal street cars everywhere. Now it's an incredible destination. And you often, as you walk along the Seine, you have the Eiffel Tower within your sights at all times. And then when it gets dark and the Eiffel Tower shines and it reminds you where you are, that's really the magic of Paris for me, is in that moment.
Yeah, the Seine is
And
just a pleasure to walk around, especially with landmarks like Notre Dame that you see and the famous bridges. For me, it's Le Marais in the center. And I think it's for a very important reason, because I love George Eugene Haussmann's style of buildings throughout the city.
Yeah.
But I also love that there's a few exceptions. And the more prominent one in the center of the city is Le Marais. And this is also evident in cities like New York, where we have a grid system, but there's an exception, Greenwich Village.
Yeah.
And I like that about Le Marais. So you could feel like you're in these big boulevards, but then you can feel like you're strolling through medieval streets.
Yeah.
And I think medieval urban planning had its merits as well. That combination of both worlds is still very much alive. So stay tuned. Next episode, we're going to discuss a topic that is actually really relevant to Paris and relevant to some of the major cities in the world. How do cafes change society? I'm Ariel. This is The Perfect City. You can find me on Urbanist Ariel across all channels, Instagram, YouTube. Dr. Tayana, where can people find you?
You can find me at Dr. T. Panova on all platforms, including Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Space. Is it Blue Space?
Thank you so much. Blue Space? Oh, Blue Sky, you mean?
Blue Sky. There's so many now.
I haven't even heard of Blue Sky.
There's so many now. But yes, you can find me on all of them at Dr. T. Panova.
Let us know, what do you think about 15-minute cities? Ooh, we're so curious. Stay curious, my friends.